Good afternoon. Today is Monday, October 3rd, 2016, and this is a meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Madam Clerk, can we go to the first item?
First item, roll call. Commissioner Venetian. Commissioner Camargo.
Here.
Commissioner Lau.
Here.
Commissioner Chan.
Present.
And President Hale will join us later.
Very good. Thank you. Can we move to the next item?
Number 2, consent of items, including the minutes. Approval of the August 1st, 2016 meeting minutes.
Were there, fellow commissioners, any changes, corrections to the meeting minutes from last?
Well, I don't have any. I was not here.
Yeah, we were not.
We were
Okay.
here.
I've reviewed them myself. Can we have, is 2 adequate?
We would need to have more than 2 of you vote on the minutes. You can certainly vote on the minutes even if you were not there. If you prefer, we could move this item until Commissioner Hale is able to attend.
Yeah, there
You
is.
stretch this out for just a second longer.
Yes, then, okay.
And do the minutes require approval if there are no changes?
The minutes can be passively approved. You just need to announce their approval as long as there are no changes.
I'm wondering if maybe there are any additional changes to come from our president. Any changes to the...
For the record, President Hale just joined us the meeting.
Very good. So thank you, President Hale. We've started on the agenda and got to the second item here, consent item, and there are no changes among the 3 commissioners who were present for that meeting.
Great. So without objection, we will approve those. And move on to the next item.
Number 3, GWP Commission staff comments.
Commissioners, any comments to offer?
I have none.
Seeing none, any comments from staff?
Absolutely. It gives me great pleasure to announce our upcoming Utility Day at GWP. It will be Thursday, October 20th. Starts at 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. That's going to be a heck of a party, 2:30 a.m.
The annual Utility Day and
Yes.
vendor?
Oh, yes. It'll be at our Utility Operations Center. I think many of you have been to this event before. We have the school kids there, which is a lot of fun and very interactive with our employees. And then we have food and refreshments, tours of the power plant, and various displays and booths and bucket truck rides and Mylar balloon displays. And everybody has a really good time with that. So once again, Thursday, October 20th. Starts at 11:30 a.m. at our Utilities Operations Center. This is, unfortunately, I don't have the flyer up on the screen, but we have this on our website, I believe. So if anybody wants any information on that, or can give us a call, and we'd be happy to assist them.
Excellent. With that, I think we'll move on to item 4A, please.
4A, Water Conservation Update, Michael DeGhetto.
Good afternoon, Mr. DeGhetto.
Water and Power.
President Hale, members of the Commission, my name is Michael DeGhetto, Assistant General Manager for Water, and I'm going to give a water conservation update. So since May of 2015, GWP customers have saved 2.5 billion gallons of water, and the drought charge stopped for use after October 1st. And the State Water Board is currently drafting new permanent regulations for ongoing conservation and for future emergencies. So they're going to have 2, regulations. One for locking in permanent reductions based on what everyone's done so far, and then just a set of regulations for any kind of future emergencies to make it a little easier for everyone to respond. They're looking at actually even naming, the stages, trying to get those stage names consistent throughout the state and consistent between agencies to help with And I've got my graph showing, so for August, we had 19% savings compared to that same period in 2013. And then our cumulative savings since May of 2015 is hovering around 21% overall. So we've gone back to our phase 2, which allows 3 days a week watering, and we're still getting good conservation even at that.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Commissioner Law.
So in the previous slide, you were talking about state level guidelines or regulations about conservation stages. Are the conservation stages that we're in specific just to our utility, or are these conservation stages statewide? Or
These stages are specific to our utility.
Okay.
They're part of our rates, and it's part of our rate setting structure under Prop 218 to have public hearings and discuss.
Right, so this is specific to our city.
Yes.
Okay.
So if the state comes out with new regs, that would be something we'd have to go back to council on if we had to update or modify.
Right, because they might come out with conservation phases that would be out of sync with ours.
Yeah, and I think, if it's just name changes, I would think we would still go to council because this is in our ordinance as well.
Okay.
Even just to change the names, if it was. Even for us, we're in phase 2, but we have different stages of the drought charge, and I usually don't call that out separately, but if you look at our ordinance, it even has different numbering for that. So that was one thing I think that the state, just statewide, everyone had issues with that. I mean, if you listen to the LA news, it's like, which utility are they talking about?
Right.
So I think that'll help everyone be a little clearer. And again, so our watering schedule is Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for 10 minutes at each station. You need to water before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. those days. And again, that's specific to GWP. Some agencies have very similar, but some have maybe odd and even days, or it depends on your address, things like that. And we've got a couple classes coming up for landscaping to do water-wise planting, one on October 15th at Crescenta Valley Water District, and then one on November 19th. It's Glendale sponsored. So, and we work with a few of the local agencies on some of this stuff to get customers in the area kind of getting the same message. And then on our website, we've got a couple of different things you can look up. Even landlords, business owners can get information and brochures to give to their tenants. And then again, we've got water saving programs and information on our website and through SoCal Water Smart and through MWD. And then we also have our site that talks about and gives examples of different kind of plants, like water saving plants and things like that you can use in your yard. And that's it, unless there's any questions.
Just a comment to offer, I think it's fabulous that we still have a high level of savings, even with returning to one additional day of watering per week. So it's encouraging. Hopefully that means we're sustaining some of the learnings that we've had during the more serious portion of the drought, and some of those will continue for.
I think so. I mean, I think, that got everyone's attention. Everyone's paying more attention now to watering. And I think there's some permanent reductions. Mm-hmm. People have changed some of their landscaping. Yeah. And it really was focused on outdoors. So making those permanent changes makes those cutbacks permanent.
Question, just to understand, what was the reason that we had the drought and then again we have enough water? So what was the change? Now we have enough water.
The change was really the precipitation and the snowpack in the Sierras. That was the biggest change. Back in 2015, I don't know if everyone remembers, but the governor was standing where they would normally take the snow measurements, and there was no snow. And he gave that press conference, and it was very dramatic. And then the same time in 2016, there was actually some snow. So the State Water Project was able to increase its allocation from 15%, and I think it's up to, I want to say it's like 45% now. So there's much more water available.
I think, members of the commission, again, kudos to our residents who just did an outstanding job. I think oftentimes you'll find that when you go to this level of conservation, those habits are actually ingrained and you see new plateaus established. We're actually getting more conservation than we had expected by going back to phase 2. We were expecting the 12 to 15% range. We're still up at the 20% range. So that's just a testament to what folks have done, either by making permanent changes to their landscape or just making permanent changes to how often they water. A lot of times folks think 7 days a week watering is what it takes, and when they're forced to do it 2 or 3 times, they realize, hey, I can do this. And obviously the benefits of using less water for them financially and from an environmental standpoint. So residents have done a great job. We've been compliant almost since day one. We're actually not taking this, we are taking this seriously and not assuming that now there's plenty of water. I think, as Mike said, the North experienced the snowpack and the precipitation. We didn't. As you obviously know, the El Nino never came to fruition. I think we are the beneficiaries of an extremely well-run organization, the Metropolitan Water District, and that's probably one of the biggest and finest run in the country, and I think we're reaping the benefits of a lot of hard work and planning that they've done. So, but that doesn't mean we should give up, and then we should continue to look at ways that we can conserve, because this is something, as you all are well aware, is not going away.
Are we going to be continuing enforcement efforts?
Yes, I think most of our enforcement efforts, we had some folks that were specifically retained to go out at certain times when we first went to phase 3, and we don't see the need to do that as aggressively, because I think people have gotten used to it, and those that have been unwilling or unable to comply with the law have faced those consequences, and it's been a really small amount, to be honest with you. And a lot of our enforcement effort is somebody will call us and tell us, and we might keep an eye on them with our existing staff, but we just haven't seen the need for that level. I think folks are getting with the program, but I believe me, if somebody's out of line, it'll be corrected by their neighbors or somebody who's walking the neighborhood. So
if something's really egregious or extremely obvious.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We just haven't seen that.
Right.
After a few times of folks that were double and triple offenders, they got the message.
Right.
So, yeah, but if we do see that, absolutely, we'll take action.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4B, please.
4B, legislative update. Silva Ogarian.
Good afternoon, President and members of the Commission. My name is Silva Ogarian, and I'm the Senior Administrative Analyst for Glendale Water and Power. I'm here to give you a brief legislative update. Since our last meeting on May 2nd, where I discussed Assembly Bill 2339 regarding net energy metering, and our efforts to work with Chairman Gatto of the Committee on Utilities and Commerce, since that date, on May 27th, the bill was held in suspense, and we haven't heard from it yet, so that's good news for us. Moving on to another bill, SB 1298 by Senator Hertzberg. On August 25th, we sent a letter to the Honorable Mike Gatto on behalf of the City of Glendale to support Senator Hertzberg's Senate Bill 1298, which gives cities, counties, and local water agencies broader authority to finance local projects that capture and reuse stormwater. On August 31st, that bill was ordered inactive file, and no activity has taken place since then. And I've provided you guys with a copy of the letter that was signed by the mayor, just for your information. September 30th was the last date for the governor to sign any bills. Yes, sir.
Before we move on from SB 1298,
Yes.
what is the significance of linking the definition of sewer under Prop 218 to include those stormwater capture?
Mr. President, members of the Commission, really what this has been a long effort on the part of local government. Under Prop 218, when you're setting rates for refuse, for sewer, or for water, you have a special process that you go through. It doesn't have to go to the ballot. It's a process that allows you to give a 45-day public notice. You've all been through it with the water. It's somewhat, I don't want to say an abbreviated process, but not as cumbersome as going to a full election. Since the stormwater regulations have come out, and NPDES was first passed by the federal government and then brought down to us, it's been our attempt to try to get those fees, stormwater fees, in that same category, and we've been unsuccessful. To be honest with you, this is more of a public works issue, but when I transitioned into water and power, I carried some of it with me so that we could help a smoother transition back with the stormwater. But this would be important for us to set fees specific to stormwater projects and programs of which we're mandated to implement by the state. So it just makes it a little bit easier, a little bit less cumbersome to try to set up a rate schedule. Otherwise, you have to go to a full vote. And Commissioner Hale, I think you're aware Los Angeles did this, and they were successful, but it wasn't easy to do it. So that's really what the crux of this particular bill was.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all for the bills that we have had since the last meeting. September 30th was the last day for the governor to sign or veto any bills passed by the legislature, and we will start the new session as of January 4th.
Mr. President, members of the commission, one other item that didn't quite rise, it had a head of steam, if you will, and this was the issue of grid regionalization. And it became a big issue. And that was essentially the expansion of the California Independent System Operator system to go to a number of other southwestern and western United States cities, or states, excuse me, and bring the system or expand the system out beyond the boundaries of California that could have changed how the governing board acts and a number of other things. There was a lot of angst amongst utilities, both investor-owned and publicly owned, for a number of reasons, most of which was we thought this was being driven way too fast, and I think it was being driven way too fast. And some of the concerns on the other side have a lot of influence, and we're able to push it along. But all of us, and I say us, cities, general managers, went for a one-day kind of push things as hard as we could to get at least the legislature to back up and say, let's take a longer look at this. Let's bring it out to committee. Let's talk about it a little bit more. And we were successful. It was pulled back, and I'm sure it'll come up again. It will come up again there's no question, and we can talk about it a little bit more. But potentially a big issue. You know, we're not in the CAISO, but future, who knows what the future holds. And then when you start to look at our transmission as it relates to the CAISO and some of the costs that could be incurred, plus what we thought was the potential loss of influence over the transmission system, it was important for us to at least weigh in and get more information, and we were successful in doing that.
So, Mr. Zern, what was the public policy implication, or what was the push? What was the selling point? What problem were the proponents of this trying to solve by pushing for this grid regionalization? Because I've heard about the push, and I've heard about I've heard that they wanted to achieve some amorphous efficiency by expanding the scope of CAISO, right. But I've never really heard exactly what problems they were trying to solve.
One of the issues, Mr. President and members of the commission, that they were looking at was this would expand our ability transmission-wise to potentially bring in other renewables. Okay. There's some that are naysayers, because I will tell you that a lot of the electrical utilities that were involved in this, in fact, almost all of them, are owned by Mr. Buffett. And he owns a tremendous amount of wind in the Wyoming, Montana area that doesn't have a direct connection to California, and obviously California is the market to send renewables, at least today. We're way ahead of the rest of the United States. That's if you're looking at it from that different slant, but the potential of getting that here. But I think general selling point was that it would open the markets for us transmission-wise to bring additional renewables. However, the cost, I think, is the one issue that needs to be vetted a lot more deeply, and what that would cost our ratepayers, or especially those ratepayers that use the California Independent System Operators transmission lines. If our lines are all in place, the Washingtons and Oregons or Utahs of the world aren't going to pay us for what's already in place. But if anything new gets built to go to their states, then we'll all have to pay a percentage of that, or California will. You can bet we have more users, so that the potential disparity between the benefit that they would get and the cost they'd have to incur versus the same for us, at least on what we saw and on paper, didn't look equitable. So that's where we pushed mostly to say, let's take a step back and make sure we're vetting this properly and looking at the whole picture. And are we benefiting one particular group? Are we benefiting ourselves? Because I'd be all for it. As I've said to you many times, we're transmission poor.
Yeah.
So if this opened up the ability for us to bring more renewables in from that area, I just didn't see it being economically feasible at this point.
I just don't know. You can't legislate more transmission, right? So it just doesn't seem like you're achieving the goal unless it's just one tariff rate, right? So if the goal was to create one tariff rate so that you didn't have multiple balancing authorities bringing the power in, but passing a bill doesn't add an additional transmission line to get the wind from Wyoming to here.
Right.
So
And there would have been, at least on that system, a consolidation of balancing authorities. But if you weren't on that system, like we aren't, doesn't eliminate those potential duplications if that's how people are looking at them.
Sure.
I have a question. What is the timeline for this?
It was just pulled back. It was being pushed hard by the governor's office. It was pulled back, and there's no timeline for it. But I assume we'll see it again next year.
We'll see it again.
Yeah,
I'm betting. If I was a betting man, I would say you'll see it in some iteration again next year.
We're at the end of a 2-year session with all the members up for re-election, or at least all the assembly members up for re-election. So January 30th will be the deadline to introduce new legislation on this.
So when we looked at it the first time, were we able to get some sort of cost estimate? No?
Nothing that we could hang our hat on. Everybody said it won't, it'll all, return on investment, and over a period of time it's a great investment, but no. And for those of us who had our folks crunch some numbers, it looked like, I don't know about that. It just looks like it could be a tremendous cost passed on. And also just gauging by comments and feedback you got from the other states, like they were like, no. We're going to do our thing. We aren't giving in. We aren't going to concede any authority to California. We aren't going to concede any. There will be no concessions from us to California. I mean, it's either we're in together, or you guys we're not. So that kind of attitude also was alarming, especially as you're bringing there's the threat of, let's face it, there's coal in Utah. There's coal in those same there might be wind in Wyoming, but there's a lot of coal in Wyoming too. So if you make that connection, although we can't bring coal in. It's like, what might happen, though? Could you run coal through California and out to somebody else? I don't know. So there was some environmental issues as well, if not just philosophical ones.
It's just a very strange thing, because no act of the California State Legislature can impose anything on any of the other states that would be required.
Right.
I mean, the only mechanism to achieve what they were seeking to achieve is some sort of an interstate compact.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
And if there's no appetite on the part of the other states to do that, then it's a very strange.
That's really, I think you've summed it up well. And it's like, maybe we aren't seeing exactly what the end game or benefit is, but we need more information and a lot more discussion before we ever went down that path, if we ever went down that path.
I missed the last meeting, and I understand the renewable portfolio standard was presented. And I assume in there we have a schedule of approximately how much renewable or additional renewable resources we'll be needing in the future, I assume. I hope I can get a presentation.
Yes.
Get a copy of it? Okay.
Did you get a copy? Would you like a copy?
Yes, please. I would
Can
like to
send
have a
it to
copy.
you,
Yeah,
yes.
I believe
We
they
are-
weren't here either.
We'll make sure everybody gets a copy of that. But we're good on the first run of getting our 30%. But we're going to have to do a lot of work to get to 50 by
Right.
2030. But I think that's goes without saying. A lot of people are going to be, striving in that direction. There's a lot of good news on the horizon. Prices are coming down in some of the renewable categories. Solar seems to continue to go down. So we'll see. But we're doing very well at this point. Now it's just a matter of how we're going to. And that's a good thing for us because we have a bit of a breathing room. We're not fighting to get to the first goal. We're pretty much there. Now we have some time to start to go through that second 50% goal, which will be much more difficult than it's been for us to get to.
And with that, the 50% goal, we would need additional transmission capacity, correct, or no?
Well, we only have the transmission capacity we have now, and it doesn't look like there's any available. So we're going to have to make it work on where we're at now. So we're either going to have to look at local generation that doesn't need that kind of transmission, or we're going to have to look at trading up transmission where we have maybe like coal assets now at IPP or at San Juan, and then using that transmission to bring in renewables. But I would not look. I wouldn't be too optimistic that we're going to find a whole lot more transmission out there. I think it's pretty well sewn up. So we're going to have to work with what we have.
Just to create a little bit of a hook with our agenda, where the legislature is not going to be revisiting the RPS mandate for at least a little while, right?
I would hope so, yes.
We're not hearing any additional bills.
No, I think as Silva indicated, I think the hotter topic now is the net energy metering and the whole distributed generation issue, which was part of 350. They sort of backed off on it, but said we'll be back. So I think that's probably what you'll hear more of. I think they're okay on the RPS, I hope. And, our contention has always been, well, it's 2030 now, so let us get there or get close and see where we're at before you might make another move on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4C, please.
4C, Aliso County update. Steve Cern.
Mr. President, members of the commission, not a whole lot to say, which I think we'll look at as good news. Some of the dire prognostications that were here at the beginning of summer didn't come to fruition. If you recall, there was estimates of as many as 14 curtailment days, which could have resulted or would have resulted in blackouts, and we did not have any. I think most folks that were involved are kind of saying we overestimated this, obviously. But I think there's a lot of credit that's being given to the customers, and that not just our customers, all the customers in this region who are affected by Aliso Canyon. And the outreach efforts from social media to, telephone reminders, I think that certainly the staff here at GWP did an outstanding job. And when looking at it initially and not getting a lot of help from the gas company, both LA and I think Glendale were two cities that said, we'll do this. We got this ourselves. And we went out and there was no shortage of awareness when it came to this issue, and I think people responded very, very well. But, we had, I think, one day, as I had mentioned before, in June, that very hot, unseasonably hot day in June that we came close to curtailment, but didn't quite get there even this last week where we had a pretty couple hot days. We did just fine. The gas company representatives came before the city council about a month ago and gave an update, and it was pretty much along those lines that things had gone well. They were still inspecting their wells. So I think that all of their wells have had the initial inspection, and about 20% have had the second inspection. I forget what they said their success record on the first inspection was somewhere around 95%. So 95% had passed that. The second inspection is a lot more stringent, but they are, as of yet, not able to re-inject those wells. And they do have some ability to release gas that's already present, but it has to be a pretty dire emergency situation. But there is as yet no approval to re-inject those tanks or those wells. So now as we head into the winter, this is where things could get interesting. So we haven't heard a lot from the gas company. There had been some discussion that they would have some of the public meetings that they had in the spring prior to the hot weather, that we'd have those again prior to the winter, but it doesn't look like that's going to occur. So I haven't heard anything that's been discouraging or dire on their part, but as we know, that's their peak season, so we'll see. And as has been said before, those wells definitely augmented winter production for them. So we're going to have to see how that all impacts us, as we'll still need to produce electricity, albeit we don't need to produce as much as we do during the hot part of the year. But if the majority of that gas is going to heating, and anything that is in storage needs to be utilized, it'll go towards heating first and foremost. So we'll have to see how that impacts us. But so far, I mean, we got through the summer. As I said, not as dire as some of the predictions were, which is a good thing. But we did fine. See how the winter goes, and we'll keep you posted. If anything comes up or there's any information that comes out that makes us more than a little nervous, we'll make sure that everybody's.
So, Mr. Zern, speaking of being nervous, what is the current thinking on weather? I understand, I appreciate your update and going through the process of checking wells, but what is the current thinking about whether we'll ever be able to reopen Aliso Canyon? What's the thinking on that?
Very good question, Mr. Camargo, and one we've asked several times but don't get an answer to. I don't know. I mean, quite honestly, I think it's going to be a very uphill battle to get those wells reopened. And Mr. Hale, as from his situation and the residents of the city of Los Angeles, boy, I'll tell you, the way the legislature stacked up right now, and the fact that we've been able to find some other means to get by now with our first hot weather. We'll see how the winter goes, but there may be some smaller number of those wells that will be allowed to be used, not the 117 or whatever number. Maybe it's that other utilities start looking at alternatives. The city of Los Angeles, I know, is doing some work on exploring the potential to have their own pipelines or a pipeline, potentially. It's a big undertaking, but as you look towards the future and not wanting to be at the mercy of a situation like this, I think the gas company themselves, although I have not heard that directly from them, are also looking at alternatives to increase pipeline capacity, new pipeline, that would then eliminate the need to have those wells there. But my sense is, I just don't see that well farm coming back the way it was. That's just me. But we haven't heard any kind of definitive answer in that regard. It's just everything is so methodical, and everyone is so concerned, as they should be, for the health of the residents and safety, that I don't know. I mean, those are old tanks. Probably should have looked at alternatives a long time ago. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but I think you're going to have to look at different alternatives, try to get through these, and if that's even IOUs and Edisons of the world that will look at alternatives as well to try to take that load off by becoming more self-sufficient. I don't know. We'll see.
You have in this circumstance a global environmental catastrophe with more GHGs emitted than most of the coal plants in the country in one summer, combined with the local public health emergency of evacuating an entire community because of the health impacts of that gas being in the environment. And I don't see any movement afoot on having the gas company pay a penalty for that yet. And I don't see those residents ever being satisfied with that well field ever operating again. So even if the CPUC is inclined to reopen the well field, it's going to be an uphill battle, and there's going to be legislative actions to prohibit that from happening. And I don't know how those are going to shake out in the legislature. So it's all a big question mark at this point. The only question is how we all respond to it in the short and long run, with supply issues and then with the future of our electricity grid as it relates to gas generation. Any other questions? Item 4D, please.
4D, Water Capital Improvement Program, Michael DeGhetto.
Welcome back, Mr. DeGhetto.
Thank you. President Hale, members of the commission, my name is Michael DeGhetto, Assistant General Manager for Water, and I'm going to give an update on our Water Capital Improvement Program.
One second, I just want to interrupt him. He's Chief Assistant General Manager of Water, recently promoted, so that, congratulations.
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 Thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks. So I was going to start with some introduction. So I asked my engineering staff to come, and so if everyone can stand up that's in the water engineering staff, kind of stand up. And the reason I wanted them to come is, when I talk about the capital improvement program, it takes people to do it. So this is the staff from GWP that works on this. So I appreciate all their work, and we really couldn't have a capital program without them. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm going to start off with the intro on the presentation, and the two presenters are Gerald Tom, Senior Civil Engineer, and Raja Takidan, Senior Civil Engineer. And they're going to take turns as we go through the presentation. And it's really broken into two parts. It's completed projects and current projects. And I wanted to start a little bit, we say CIP a lot, and what it means is capital improvement program. And it's a set of projects that really costs more than a typical operations and maintenance work. And they're usually planned in advance. So in O&M work, from an accounting standpoint, you might consider that to be expense instead of capital. And it's how you account for those dollars and how you charge it when you have those expenditures. And typically a capital item has a longer life than an expense item. So maybe an expense might be chemicals that we use. You buy those chemicals to treat the water, and you would treat that as an expense. Whereas on the capital side of it, it might be even a vehicle, maybe something that's, like one of our work trucks could be like $50,000, and you might expect to get 5 or 10 year life out of that. So you would capitalize that. And when we do this work, a lot of times there's overlap. So maybe if you have a large main break, you might have to put in a section of new pipe, and we might capitalize that. So it's basically how we would charge that work. It wouldn't necessarily be maintenance, it would be capital, because maybe that one repair in that one section of pipe might be $25,000 to get that done. So whereas if it was a leak on a smaller pipe and we were able to put a repair clamp on that, we would expense that. And that's really what we mean by capital. And for the last couple of years, the water capital improvement program has primarily been funded through a $32 million bond issuance that we did back in 2013. So what Gerald and Raja are going to talk about is what that $32 million got everyone, got the ratepayers. We put a lot of effort into getting the bond and doing all this stuff to get to that point. So this talk a little bit is going to say, okay, what did we get from that? So I'm going to turn it over to Gerald Tom at this point to start on the presentation.
Good afternoon, President Hale and members of the Commission. I'm Gerald Tom, Senior Civil Engineer with Water Division. I'm happy to share with you some of the projects that we completed with a $32 million bond. The first one I'd like to share with you is the Adams Hill Water Main Replacement Project. It was completed August 2013. The project cost $3,038,000, and the project accomplishments were: we replaced 6,998 lineal feet of 8-inch main, replaced 360 lineal feet of 6-inch main. And this was pretty important as far as providing new water mains for streets in the Adams Hill area that did not have a water main. And we had some issues where some of the customers had service lines on their neighbors' properties behind them, and some of them were leaking, and there were never any easements that were obtained back when they constructed those homes. So consequently, there was no way for the homeowner to get service. So we solved that problem. We put new mains on those streets that did not have mains. And we've also installed 66 valves, and we installed 16 new fire hydrants. That's in addition to what was there before, so we improved fire safety as well as replacing 5 other fire hydrants. Next. Next project is Beaudry Terrace water main replacement. The project was completed May 2015. The project costs $1,970,000. The project accomplishments were replaced 1,797 linear feet of 12-inch main and replaced 2,657 linear feet of 8-inch main and replaced 451 linear feet of 6-inch main. And so we've also installed 24 valves and installed 15 hydrants and 7 additional hydrants, which improved fire safety. And the big thing about the Beaudry Terrace project was that it improved reliability, system reliability. What happened there was we had some main breaks due to old cast iron pipes, and so we've solved that problem by replacing the old cast iron pipes with new ductile iron pipes. The next project I'd like to share with you is Kenyatta main replacement. Actually, Kenyatta water main improvements. I want to make that distinction. This project was completed in November 2015. The project cost $4,592,000, and the project accomplishments and installed 395 linear feet of 12-inch main, installed 5,096 linear feet of 8-inch main, and it cleaned and lined 9,820 linear feet of water mains. And you can see a picture there. That's one of our new water mains that we cleaned and lined. And we have very large mains in this area, transmission mains, and this was a very important project to clean and line them to keep them the longevity of those mains, because it would have cost a lot more to replace them out. We installed 42 new valves and replaced 35 valves, installed 13 new fire hydrants, and also replaced 11 fire hydrants. The next project I'd like to share with you is the Kenneth water main replacement project. That project was completed in July 2016. The project cost was $1,865,000. The project accomplishments were we installed 5,700 linear feet of 12-inch main. We installed 44 new valves, installed 6 new fire hydrants, and we replaced 4 fire hydrants. We improved system reliability and improved pressure and flow. And the big thing that we accomplished there at this project is operational improvements. We used to have a 4-inch main on Kenneth, and it was on the high pressure side. And so the problem with that was every time we had to take the Brand Park Reservoir out of service, it caused a big effort on our field staff. We had to put in temporary tanks as well as activate a pressure reducing station to provide water to our customers on the west end of the city. So now with this main replacement project, we could take the Brand Park Reservoir out of service and do maintenance on it without having to go through that large effort. And the next project is the Ben Lomond water main replacement project. Was in the vicinity, the adjacent streets adjacent to the Kenneth project. The project was completed in July 2016. The project cost $1,703,000. And the project accomplishments were install 5,600 linear feet of 8-inch main, install 25 valves, install 10 new fire hydrants, replace 2 fire hydrants. We improved system reliability, improved system pressures and flow rates, and we also improved fire safety. And I'd like to invite my colleague Roger Takita to come up and share about the next few projects.
I have a question there. Sorry. Well, for the pipe, you said replacement, and you have many valves added. Why you added valves?
Well, we actually, every time that we do a main replacement, we actually abandon the existing main, so we actually have to put in new valves on the new main. And for our cleaning and lining project, we actually replace out we use the same main. We clean and line the old main, we clean it out and put it the cement mortar lining, and we replace the existing valve and put in a new valve. Actually, we have to use the existing valve to gain access into the water main to clean and line it.
So you're keeping existing and adding new valves?
Sometimes we add some, in the past we didn't have a lot of valves, so we try to add more so when we do maintenance or if we have a main break, we don't have to have such a big area affected by the shutdown, so we try to add new valves if we need to.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commission President, members of the Commission. My name is Raja Takidan. I'm an engineer with the Water Division in support of operations. And we have one team member, engineering team member, is missing. Her name is Tracy Wasif. Her wedding was yesterday, so she couldn't be here today. As you know, the Glendale water system have 35 reservoirs and about 34 pump stations. And most of the facilities a lot of the facilities are pretty old. And like this particular reservoir, which is over 85 years old, it has a wooden roof. And the completed project was to replace 89 columns inside the reservoir that were compromised. And we also replaced the joint sealant, the construction joints inside the reservoir. The cost was $521,000 and was completed in 2015. Another project is to upgrade our SCADA system, it's the supervisory control and data acquisition. And the cost was close to $4 million. And in this project, we replaced all the programmable logical controllers. They were outdated. And we replaced them with a new Allen Bradley, Ethernet based on the communication. And also we deployed a new wireless communication system with a new human-machine interface at each of these the pump stations. And also we installed a very large number of sensors for pressure and flow, and also like chemical leak sensors, and also they can detect water leaks inside the pump station. And also we installed the new security sensors for like motion sensors and different annunciators to give alarms in case somebody the unauthorized person enters the facility. Another project was to rehab a recycled, in this case it was a recycled tank, and the cost was approximately $250,000. This was a 200,000 gallon tank called Upper Shoal Recycled Water Tank. And we actually recoated the interior and exterior of the tank. And we installed the new fiberglass ladder inside and safety features on the tank. Another project we have, it's actually a program, it's an annual program where we bring in, every 2 years we bring in a company that does efficiency testing on the pumping units that we have. And we have over 110 pumping units in our system. And based on their report and their study, we prioritize the replacement of inefficient units. So we've been replacing approximately 2 pumping units each year. And the cost for the last 3 years was close to $550,000. Currently, on my staff, we're working on a couple projects that we're not showing on a slide, but we're rehabbing Glorieta Well 6, and also we're replacing a surge tank at one of our pump stations. And we have also, we're in design stages to rehab few of our steel tanks. So with that, I want to ask Gerald to continue with the current projects under his staff.
President Hale, members of the commission, I'd like to, Gerald Tom, Senior Civil Engineer, I'd like to share with you some of the current projects that we're working on. So this one is the Hoover-Toll Keppel Recycled Water Project. The project cost is $2 million, and the project outcomes is we're going to install approximately 5,890 lineal feet of 8-inch water pipeline to expand the city's recycled water system to serve the recycle water to the Hoover High School, Toll Middle School, and the Keppel Elementary School. The great thing about this project, it will reduce approximately 55 acre-feet of potable water usage per year, and we anticipate to complete this project in fall of 2017. Actually, we're going to be going to council pretty soon to award the contract to design build contractor JDC. The next project I'd like to share with you that we're currently working on is the slope repair at various locations. The project cost will be approximately $1 million, and we are looking to repair do site and slope repairs at the facilities as well as for the access roads. And the locations that we're going to do these site and slope repairs are Verdugo 1666 Reservoir, Ross Moines 1290 Reservoir, Chase 1290 Reservoir, Glen Oaks 968 Reservoir, and Show Canyon Pump Station. We hope to finish that project in fall of 2017. And with that, I'd like to invite our Chief Assistant General Manager, Michael DeGhetto, to come back and share with you about future projects.
President Hale, members of the commission, just to wrap up, so we recently in December completed our water system master plan, December 2015. And really the outcomes of that is analysis of the current system, projection on future needs, assessment of the current system condition, recommendation on replacements, and an initial prioritization of mid, near-term and long-term projects. And it provides us really a roadmap for future work and for budgeting. And so our water engineering team is developing a new 5-year capital improvement program, really using that water system master plan as our roadmap to develop that, to think about how much funding we're going to need and how we're going to approach the continuation of our program. And that wraps up our presentation. Do you have any questions?
I have a question. Yeah, you indicated here that the CIP has been primarily funded through $32 million of bonds. And I was just looking through all this. It seems like it comes up to maybe about $24 million. So my first question is, do we have any money left from that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We do. And so that's programmed into this year's budget. And let me go back. You used the word primarily. How about exclusively?
Okay.
You recall the financial condition of the water department was dismal, to say the least. Mm-hmm. That bond is what allowed us to continue our capital program. So it's been pretty much the exclusive funding source for us to do the work that we've needed to do. We, of course, have a new rate schedule in place. We're getting back on top. We've got our head literally above water, no pun intended, and we're building our reserves, which will allow us, hopefully in the future, to have a more pay-go system. Although I think, as Michael has indicated, when we finish looking at the 5-year projection based on the master plan, I think we're probably going to need to explore seriously another bond issuance. It's a lot of work, and we want to keep up on it because we don't want to find ourselves in the situation that some other water utilities have found themselves by waiting too long for aged systems, especially when it comes to things like fire suppression, pressure, and that kind of thing. So we do have a little bit of money left. Our capital program, to be honest with you, this fiscal year will be a lot of more pure maintenance kind of things, roofs and upkeep. And then hopefully next year we can have a little bit more robust program once we finish putting together the 5-year going forward with our master plan.
And when will that be ready? the new five-year plan?
Oh, we'll have it ready in time to present for the budget in early spring.
Right, because budget usually comes out like April or May, right?
Well, for us, it starts a lot sooner than that. So yeah, we'll be on it probably even right after the new year.
Okay.
If not sooner. And the folks are working on it now, to be honest with you. So.
About how much do we have left from the bond, from this bond initiative?
Somewhere around 10.
10 million? Yeah. Figured. Okay. Thank you.
Question for Mr. DeGhetto. So can you talk a little bit about how you prioritize? I think Mr. Takedan talked on the pumping station that you bring in a third-party consultant to help you with that component, but you also talked about, fire suppression, adding additional fire hydrants in the interest of safety. So can you speak to that prioritization process and how you decide how best to spend the $32 million in bonds?
Commissioner Camargo, it really depends. A lot of it depends on risk and consequences. So say at a pump station, if we do a test and it shows an inefficient pump, if there's multiple pumps or maybe more than one pump station that's serving that same purpose, and we have one efficient pump, maybe that's one that we'd push off longer. Whereas if it's a pump station where maybe there's only two pumps that are feeding that zone or feeding that situation, that one would go up higher in the priority. And then the consequences, Mr. Tom talked about adding additional valves. That's one of the ways we reduce those consequences. If we have more valves in the system, when there is a break, it affects fewer customers. So that reduces the consequences. The other part we look at then is the likelihood of failure. Mr. Takedan showed the reservoir where we replaced those roof members. The likelihood was pretty high that there might have been a failure of that roof. That would have caused us to take that reservoir out of service. So we balance those two things. And we look at that system-wide. So there is, we have our entire system, and then there's different pressure zones, let's say, in that. And each of the reservoirs feed a certain zone, and each pump station feeds those zones. So then you break it down by zone, too, that you're in, and really look at that likelihood and then the risk and the consequences. Hopefully that answers.
Let me add to that. When we issued this bond, what I had told the council is the money would be spent on what I called the bread and butter of the water system, and that's the distribution system. And the bulk of that money would be spent on pipes and valves and hydrants, and going in and getting old, especially cast iron pipe, older valves, and getting those all replaced. And as you can see, that's where the majority of the money did get spent. As Raja indicated, some of the valve work is an annual ongoing program. Certainly the bond helped fund some of that, but the real focus was on the distribution system, the core pipeline. And so once we made that decision, then it's a matter of sitting down and with the staff prioritizing which ones are in most need. You heard Mr. Tom indicated that on the Beaudry Terrace, for instance, it corrected a problem that we had for some time. And he very much understated that, which I appreciate. But as the former director of Public Works, I can tell you that thing was blowing up all the time. We were replacing streets after street after street. And so, the ability to come together with the group that we have now and get that taken care of when it should have been taken care of previously. But those are the kind of situations that have a past history. We can go in, we know where there's pressure issues, we know where there's fire suppression potentially problems or a need for better coverage. And so it was pretty easy. As you can see, that's a handful of projects. That money goes quick. And so we want to keep moving that along. And that's what I said, as we get this next 5-year program going and figure out our funding mechanism for that and keep this momentum, this great momentum that the staff has got going and the great job that they've done. Make sure we don't ever find ourselves in a situation where pipes are breaking all the time and outages, forced outages, unforeseen outages, that we shouldn't have.
The money does go quick, but I also want to compliment your staff because we got tens of thousands of feet of pipeline replaced in the ground with trenching and everything for what seems to me to be a very cost-effective amount of money. So I want to just compliment your staff on delivering those projects really effectively with using the bond money.
No, yeah, and I appreciate that because they did a great job. And a lot of this was done on a design-build basis, which was our staff's recommendation. That helped us tremendously. And then you saw, as Gerald indicated, where we went and lined pipe. So that's salvaging really, that's good pipe and going in and lining it, which is much less expensive and less intrusive than it would be to replace that pipe. But getting it early, again, it's all about a preventative maintenance program. You put the right preventative maintenance program in place, you can extend the life of your equipment and your infrastructure, and it saves money at the end of the day.
Yeah, amount of work is great, actually.
Thank you.
Outstanding.
Yeah, they have done a wonderful job.
From my point of view, they've done a great job.
Yes, I agree.
We all appreciate that. Thank you.
So it sounds like from the customer's perspective, it's business as usual. You turn the tap on and the water comes out, and there isn't any obvious sign that something underneath the ground has changed. If there are other operational differences that the customers might notice, I'd be interested to hear them. But it sounds like, for instance, for those of us who live off of Kenneth Road, I didn't notice any outages, and I'm still getting water just like I always have. So really, it sounds more like a disaster averted than a response to a problem that's imminent. So are there any other differences that, from a customer's perspective, for instance, you were talking about water pressure. Will the water pressure be more even?
I think the biggest difference from a customer perspective is by us being proactive in managing our assets like this, it actually reduces the severity of future rate increases, to be quite honest. The $32 million sounds like a lot, but when you do those bonds and you do that work, and even to the extent if we can do some pay-go based on depreciation and things like that, by doing this work ahead of time, it really reduces almost that bubble that might come later if you're not doing that work and being proactive. So honestly, that would be, maybe you wouldn't see it or notice it, but it really will affect those future rates, and it can keep them lower by us being proactive like this. And like you mentioned, I thank you for the feedback, because that's really what we strive for, is that you don't notice. So that's good news.
As I was going to say, the fact you didn't notice, and we had a lot of compliments from residents in that particular area. We had a good contractor. Let's face it, that we had a good partnership, and that goes to, again, the staff putting together the right documents and vetting out the folks. But it's somebody who was as concerned about the community as we were. So that really, really helped quite a bit. But as Mike said, whether it was in Public Works or it's in Water and Power, there used to be an old commercial that said, pay me now, pay me later kind of thing about preventative maintenance. And it holds true very much here.
Yeah.
The $5 that you spend today saves you $100 in 5 or 10 years. So being proactive is great. I mean, not just the nuisance of an outage, but what the long-term ramifications are of trying to upgrade the infrastructure when you're behind the 8 ball. Much easier to do it when you're on top of things and you're doing it in a systematic, preventative manner versus working from a reactionary standpoint. Emergency, everything's an emergency. That just becomes costly, and I don't know that you ever quite catch up, Mike.
No.
So, again, thank you for the compliments, but my great appreciation to the staff as well. They've done a great job.
Thank you. It's very impressive. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 5, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Item number 4E. Sorry.
4E, Fiber Optic Program, Craig Coonan.
And Mr. President, members of the commission, I'll have a little introduction so we don't cold start this for Craig. Many of you may be aware, not aware, that the GWP has quite a fiber infrastructure in place that we use as part of our regular business, our communications with our automated metering infrastructure, and also to a lesser extent, Public Works has fiber in place for the traffic signals and other amenities that they use in their traffic control environment. Every time that we go in and put this infrastructure in, we always overbuild it. We overbuild it with the idea that there might be a benefit later. Either we'll have to upgrade or there might be an opportunity for us to expand out to others who would be interested in having this service. And a lot of businesses have, over the years, indicated that they would like to be able to have access to that infrastructure, whether it was lit fiber or dark fiber. And so this past year, we hired a firm, Craig Keenan, as a project manager to do a business plan, an assessment and business plan of putting together essentially a fiber utility city. So Craig's going to give you the results of that, and then what we came up with, which was a two-phase plan of how we're going to implement. Kind of gave it away there because it was very favorable. But let me turn it over to Craig.
Thank you. Mr. President, Commissioners, Craig Keenan, Business Transformation and Marketing Administrator. As Steve said, one of the goals of the city is to maximize potential revenues that might be available to us, and fiber looks like that kind of an opportunity. So we went out with a competitive bid to select a company to give us an initial market assessment and business plan. And we selected Sequoia Telecom. They looked at our current fiber structure, reviewed the surrounding cities and other cities across the nation to see what they're doing as far as fiber, and they analyzed the potential here in Glendale. So in terms of market growth, they looked at a study done by Cisco, and they concluded that the internet activity in Glendale would, basically across the nation, would double over the next 5 years. Most of that is mobile type traffic, but a lot of that does end up on fiber. So basically the conclusion was that there's going to be a demand in Glendale for fiber services, and particularly in the business area, and that Glendale could provide that service and have increased revenues for the city. So if you looked at it, the business market revenue potential they came up with is between $2 and $4 million a year, which is a pretty good number. I believe Burbank does about $3 million a year, so we're comparable. We could probably do the same. We probably do about $220,000 right now. In terms of the kinds of services we would offer, we're looking at 3 areas: dark fiber, that's point to point, where you lease the fiber to a company and then they light it up and they maintain it. We don't really have to do anything unless the fiber's broken, and then we have to replace it. There's something called Metro Ethernet that basically it's a intranet kind of services. You can connect different buildings between businesses, and they can have their own little fiber network and provide that service. Or we could provide regular dedicated internet access for them. In terms of their financial projections, they developed a financial model, and they looked at a number of different combinations of services. Like I said, they settled on the 3 that I just mentioned. That business case showed over 10 years we could have annual revenues of $3.8 million, operating income of $2.6 million, and that positive cash flow would start in about 4 years, and it would take 7 years to recoup the investment. And the capital spending would have been about $9.1 million, including in-house staffing over that period of time. They also, just because people are interested, looked at residential. Now there's a couple cities that provide residential, but it's very expensive. We're talking about a $60 to $70 million investment for a city like Glendale. Chattanooga, Tennessee has phone service and internet and that for residents. But they got like a $220 million grant from the federal government to do that. Another city would be Kansas City, and Google invested in that. But I believe you might have seen an article about how Google's not going to go that route anymore because of the expense. It's just too expensive to put fiber to every house. And besides, there's a number of service providers in the city and most cities that will provide high-speed internet for residents at a really competitive price that we couldn't match. So, as far as the fiber backbone, the initial thing we wanted to do was get leased fiber down to what they call 1 Wilshire. That basically allows us to connect with the whole world. Once you get down there, you've got access to everywhere in the world. So that's what we want to do first. The next step would be to build up the fiber in the downtown area, because that's where most of the business customers will come. And then we go up north and add fiber.
So, Mr. Keenan, looking at this chart then, so is that year one, is that what gets you to 1 Wilshire?
Yes. I have to apologize, I'm colorblind, so if you ask me about colors, I'm not going to be able to. All I know, we're going to 1 Wilshire the first year. Towards the end of the first year, start of the second, we want to go downtown and build up that fiber so we could connect the business customers, and then we go up north. It's probably going to be, a year or two before we can actually start selling on any large scale to customers?
Yes. Yeah, our plan is that we make the 1 Wilshire connection. That's critical to the whole system. It's critical to the city as a whole, not just GWP, for our city operations, our radio system. The fact that we aren't there yet is a bit surprising to our CIO.
Yeah.
So really this first phase will be mostly in his ballpark as he drives us to get that 1 Wilshire connection. Then the following year, we'll come back to council with a proposal on a rate structure, marketing plan, showing them what we have in place, because the other thing that will incur in that year one, as Craig indicated, is we'll be adding some fiber in a number of locations. And we also have the ability there to make a redundant connection over the hill to connect essentially red to blue. Mr. Abweg has that infrastructure in place. It's just a matter of pulling the line. So we are set pretty well once we get that 1 Wilshire connection. And again, we'll be back to council next budget year, following budget year with our actual business plan, specific business plan, rate structure, and as I said, our marketing plan. We already have a lot of interest, as you can imagine, especially from the high-tech industry. We have DreamWorks and Disney or two, along with a lot of other folks who are, in many cases, supporting those companies. And so they're looking for that large, high impact fiber that they can get, which is another reason why that's where we focused. As Craig said, it's really, we shouldn't be in the business of putting residential fiber in. The AT&Ts and the Verizons and the cable companies of the world quite well and a lot more competitive than we are there.
Well, it sounds like you are planning on going into the residential market, right?
We aren't going into the residential market, no. It's much too costly, and quite frankly, as I told the council,
what is the slide? Financial projections?
That's telling you the reasons why we're not going into the residential
okay, because it says residential market on the top.
Right.
Yeah, but that's...
There was an interest on
folks, right.
Some folks, so that was the box to show you why we wouldn't go into it.
We wouldn't, yeah, exactly. Okay, so like for the large companies like Disney, what would be the benefit for them? Reliability, costs?
I think just having access. I mean, they have so much data that they want to pass from one end of town to the other, or if they can make the connection to pass it from Burbank to Glendale. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine the kind of thing that goes across the line for them is high tech. It's data and it's
speeds
a
are
movie. So speed, is
speed they can get. I mean, it's.
They've already asked us before. They asked us if we could consider a couple of locations before our formal plans in place, and we're talking to them now.
So this revenue potential, $2 to $4 million a year, is assuming that we're just only going after the large customers and not residential?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, business customers. So
Businesses.
if you're along this route and you want fiber service in your business, then we'll consider it, yes. Probably going to be the largest customers though.
But I could imagine, I think, based on what some of the preliminary rates we talked about, that there's probably other businesses depending on their need. Now, if they're a tech-centric type of business, yeah, even if they're a smaller business, this was very beneficial to them.
Yeah, well, it
But I
could
think
be
it's best-
5,000
Yeah.
mid-sized to large customers.
So we're talking about our rates would be much more competitive than the other data companies and AT&T and companies like that, right? Is that what we're saying?
Well, for these size customers, we'll be able to provide them something AT&T can't.
Can't, right, for the large ones, but the smaller ones that you were talking about, the smaller business ones.
I think to make it worth their while, as I said, they may be smaller, but they may be very tech-centric, so it would be important to them. Otherwise, maybe the smaller end businesses would be better off just going with the AT&Ts and cable as well. But if you had a small business that was all about pushing data across tech lines and you wanted speed and amount, even if you only had 10 or 15 employees, this may be very beneficial to you.
Even with the most modern technology, Charter can't deliver a 10 gigabit connection over cable lines.
And that's what we're looking at right now
is
is 10 gig, if not more. Right. That's kind of where we've set the ceiling tentatively now, but we feel very comfortable we can go higher than that. So.
Okay.
So, sorry, just on the installations, will the businesses be paying for their branch connection to the trunk line, or is that something that GWP is going to provide?
Well, that's something more into the details. Right now, if a customer wants to connect dark fiber, they'll pay that connection.
So it's where do we recover the cost? Do we recover it over time in rates, or do we just charge them up front and charge a lower data rate?
So that second phase that I talked about will also include how would we perform the maintenance? Would we offer it? Would we make it incumbent upon the customer has to take care of it? Would we do it through what means would we do it through? So those are all things to be explored in that phase too.
Yeah. And staffing too, right?
It's absolutely staffing, and again, we're working very closely with our ISD people who and our own to the extent that there are our electrical maintenance crews can do some of that work. We'll look at that as well. They have done some in the past, so we'll look at the ability to do that as well. But absolutely, staffing will be a big deal.
So on the financial components of this, I'm assuming, so the seed money for this is probably coming from Power System because this is all command and control infrastructure that was installed in the context of our Power System installations, right?
Well, we'll benefit from this ourselves. So.
Well, that's what I was going to ask are these revenues lockboxed to the new fiber enterprise once we start generating rates from the fiber enterprise, or is this going to be a benefit for the broader Power System?
We initially talked about, and then probably what we'll do is have a segregated accounting of this within the utility for the fiber. To the extent that there is infrastructure in place, that there may be some level of payback, I'll use that term, to the electric utility for that, and then any services the electric utility provides that they would be paid for. But the idea is we'd have a subset of the fiber, and then hopefully at this point, as you saw, when you have a 7-year return on investment, begins to be self-sufficient, and then we can work it from there.
So is the longer range plan to spool this off into its own utility, or would this require a legal change to the scope of of GWP's operations under the city charter? Or
it wouldn't be our intent to spin off a separate entity. Yeah. But I think we're covered as far as I'll let Christine.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to look at, but I think we're in such a preliminary stage that we haven't explored that at this point.
Yeah. It seems like it's an ancillary business activity, not explicitly related to anything GWP does, except for, but it could potentially be a much bigger enterprise.
Yeah, it'd be a nice problem.
Yeah, no, if it's successful. And theoretically, if a developer were putting in an apartment building or some sort of a multifamily unit and they wanted to connect, they were along the trunk line, would there be anything to preclude them from getting a fiber connection? And
we hadn't thought about that. We had drawn the line pretty clearly, residential versus versus business customers, but there's nothing that's out of the question. I mean,
Yeah, because it would seem to me that baking in new development as a component of this, where it's already along the trunk line, adding a branch should be, I think, an option.
and if it's something that they're interested in,
Right.
and they're willing to live by the fee schedule and
Yeah,
and
I mean,
whatever
it-
policies we have for it, I don't know that we would necessarily turn them down.
Right, and I think that, it shouldn't be, offering the service to business customers as a starting point seems to make sense. I don't think it should be prejudiced against a residential prospect in the event that the owner of the property would be willing to pay to have the improvements made and make the connection to the trunk line.
And if you look at the downtown development especially, those look like potentially prime candidates. And I think when we talk residential, we're more about bringing it deep into single-family neighborhoods. That's really not where we're at. So,
Right.
but yeah, you're right. As long as, you're in like the situation downtown where we've got that much residential development
Right.
that's wedged right there with business, if they're interested and willing to pay, I wouldn't see why we turn them down. And those are high-tech buildings a lot of times,
Yeah.
and they're appealing to a certain clientele, which are tech-savvy folks, I think.
And they're already cutting up the street. They're already,
Oh,
cutting up utilities. So it just doesn't make any sense not to install this as an amenity if, in the event that there's a future for the market.
President Hale, in addition to that, some of those units have been specifically designed to be live-work units.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually baked into the architecture that they're designed to have people, working from home, essentially, or living in their office, which, depending on which way you look at it.
Yeah.
So they may be prime candidates for this. And what a selling point for the building to attract
Right.
great tenants who could be, incubating great new businesses here in Glendale. So.
And on that same note, we've worked closely with economic development as a business attractant as well. So using this as one of the many favorable attributes of Glendale.
Most of managers, they like to have that connection at home, because when they go home, they want to be connected,
Right. Right.
And, presumably if this is as successful as we were hoping it might be, $2 to $4 million a year of operating income, if the expenses are low, we could see ourselves having $60 million in the bank to start a residential build-out at some point.
We never know what the future might hold.
Exactly.
Yeah, at some point in time, and who knows if federal grants come back,
right?
Because that's not out of the question either. Somebody comes up with a grant program later on. I mean, that's obviously going to change the way we look at it, but we'll see. I mean, we kind of want to start where we feel comfortable. We just don't, at this point today, don't think we should be in the residential business. And then we'll see where we go, see how successful we are.
So I'm just curious, have we ever considered partnering up with like the cable companies or AT&T or companies such as that? I mean, have we considered that ever?
We looked at it, but other than the possibility that they may want to lease some of the fiber space, but they're not going to,
They're not.
They got a business. Those are their customers. And anything that may encroach on that, I don't think they'd be
They're not interested.
favorable. But to the extent that we might have core infrastructure that they'd be interested in tapping into, I don't know how.
That would be wholesale kind of situation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's good. Great. Wholesale
Yeah.
interchange. So, yeah, I don't think as far as partnering up, because that's, again, the way we looked at it preliminarily, we looked at is there are some of these smaller companies that we might partner with to do residential, and it just didn't pencil out at this point in time. But to the extent that we could go on the wholesale market with current providers, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
That's a business-to-business kind of a transaction.
So that may happen in the future, discussions?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
As you can see, it's we're molding this thing. I mean, we get this first critical component done. We add to the infrastructure. We get the one Wilshire taken care of, and then we can go from there.
So to sum up a little bit, as far as the benefits, it's can support Glendale economic goals. We talked about that with the economic development and those things. We can leverage underutilized assets that we already have out there. We can generate new revenue stream for the city. We can have internally with the city, data communications at very high speeds, connect to One Wilshire. As Steve said, we don't have to do the microwave radio stuff from the top of the hill and all that. It really makes a difference. And we can make Glendale a very attractive place for high-tech businesses once we have this all in place. And we talked about this timeline and what we're going to do. And I can't see it, so.
I hijacked it, sorry.
So we'll go right to questions. We already talked about it.
Skipped ahead.
So if you have any questions about?
Could you just, I'm sorry if I missed this, but just review again the timeline for when this could roll out?
Well, I believe ISD is already looking into One Wilshire.
Right, so it would be our hope that by the end of this fiscal year, which would be June, if not encroach a little bit into the 2017 summer, that ISD, our Information Services Department, could have the One Wilshire connection done, and we could have the additional infrastructure we wanted to install complete. That way, by that budget process, we would have council approve the preliminary business plan, rate schedule, and marketing plan. That's just to get our feet in the water. And I would think that probably by the end of 17, maybe early 18, we're marketing this pretty actively. As I said, we've already got a lot of.
And we do have some customers.
We have some customers
that come along and they want some dark
But once this is
fiber.
released, I think they'll probably go, okay, we'll.
And we'll continue to kind of help them out, but we won't be out there knocking on doors for a year or two.
We're not turning anybody away who comes and talks to us that fits the category we're looking for.
Right.
So we're working with them now, and then we'll just roll them into the new formal system once we're done with that. But
So there are businesses that are already receiving service through this?
yes.
Okay. And this is obviously very important in terms of retaining very, prominent and big companies in the area who employ a lot of people and bring a lot of economic benefits to the city. So
Yeah, it's definitely a benefit for
important.
folks looking to come here and folks who are looking to grow. And if they're looking to go somewhere else because of the lack of this, that helps keep them, yes.
Yeah.
So the retention part of it as well
Good.
as the attractive.
Yeah, so we want these businesses to be aware of it. That's great. Thank you.
So, and I'm assuming those are all done on a one-off private line franchise kind of agreement between GWP and those
As we've done them on a contract basis.
Yeah,
Lease
By
basis,
release
yeah.
agreement.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions?
Thanks.
Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5, please.
5, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to the appropriate staff for investigation and report.
I have one card before me for Mr. Joseph Fabish, but I believe he may have taken off a little bit earlier in our meeting, so apologies to Mr. Fabish for that our conversations went a little long and he was not afforded his opportunity to speak. Would welcome him back at our next commission meeting to discuss his concerns, or he could certainly submit something in writing to the utility and have that before us at our next meeting. So with that, we'll move on to item number 6.
6, agenda forecast.
So, members, I'd like to suggest that we actually strike our Aliso Canyon update from our next meeting in light of the fact that the severity and significance of this seems to have lessened over the summer months, and make this a every other month kind of update. The urgency doesn't seem to be as high as it was, or at least we perceived it to be, unless there are any objections to that suggestion.
And Mr. President, if anything does arise unexpectedly, I'll make sure I email all of you, and then you can make a decision of whether you want to put that on the agenda or not.
That's great. And Commissioner Camargo, I think you had a suggestion for our next meeting as well.
Yes, which was to address elections.
You are quite right. It is that season again. So without objection, we should probably put our President and Secretary elections on our next meeting for November.
I have no other changes.
Commissioners, any other suggested changes to our schedule?
Nope.
Okay, that'll bring us through December. And without objection, we will approve the agenda forecast as amended to strike Aliso Canyon and add elections to our November meeting. And that brings us to item number 7.
7, adjournment.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded, and without objection, we are adjourned.